Hi! In this video, I'll explain how you can add components to your website and position them as you wish. You'll normally be working with templates, and I've already recorded a video that explains this in more detail, so take a look at that before you continue watching this video. But if you want to insert additional components yourself or even design whole page areas, you have to bear a few things in mind. We'll look at what you need to consider in this video now. Let's go back to the template I edited in the previous video. If I want to add a new component, I can do so by going to Add Component under Components. On the left-hand side, you'll find a list of all the components available to you on this page. To insert them on your page, you just have to drag them to the desired position with the mouse button held down and release it over the corresponding rectangle, and this will place the text component accordingly. But let's go back a few seconds. Before you release the component, you'll see these two rectangles where you can place the component either above this text component here or below it. But how can you place components next to each other, like up here where this image is next to the text and button here on the left-hand side? Well, to do this, first you need some kind of basic framework that consists of sections, rows, and columns. The largest part of this framework is the sections. They are displayed in the Pagebuilder with a turquoise border. However, you can't add components to these sections yet. As you can see, I don't have any blue rectangles here in which to place the component. In other words, in order to insert components on your page, you have to add rows, which are displayed with a blue border. The order is therefore as follows: sections, rows, and then components. You can now place components above and below each other in these rows. And if you think back to our initial question of how to position components next to each other, you can do that by setting up several columns when adding a row here under row. If I add a row with only one column, I can only place components above and below each other in this row. But if I add a row with several columns, for example 2, I can now insert components next to each other. So with rows and columns inside your section, you have a kind of grid into which you can easily insert your page components. However, sections and rows are not only good for positioning, they also have 3 other important use cases. The first is that you can use them to set backgrounds. We already mentioned this in the previous video, but just as a quick refresher, you can do this by selecting the settings via the gear icon and then selecting an image or a color as the background via this option. The second use case for sections and rows is that they define the width of the workspace. What exactly do I mean by this? As you can see here, the width is set to wide. If I set a background color, then you can see this better. So this is how wide the row is when I set it to wide. But I can also change the width to full, for example, which makes it even wider, or to extra small, which makes it very narrow. As you can see, this also changes the components within the row because the width you set here is also the maximum width of your components. The same is true for your section. Sections in templates are usually always set to full, but you can also change the width if you wish. It goes without saying, however, that a row cannot be wider than a section. So if you reduce the width of your section, you may also end up reducing the width of your rows. But now to the third and final use case of sections and rows. You can also use sections and rows to control the spacing between your components. To do this, let me first explain that the spacing of components can actually be set in their settings using the margin top setting. This allows you to set how big the distance between the component and the next element above it should be. The same is true for rows and sections, and you'll find the same option in their respective settings. However, in rows and sections, you'll also find another setting that allows you to control the spacing. It's here at the bottom. With padding, you can control the internal spacing of your row or section. This means that you can use it to control the spacing between the respective edge, for example the edge at the top and the next component. The same goes for the bottom, both on the right and left-hand side. This doesn't work for components themselves, but it's still an incredibly important tool for arranging components on your page according to your wishes. Very good. You've now added and positioned new components by adding sections, rows, and columns, and even changed the spacing between them. However, doing this means there is something else for you to do. While our templates are all designed to look beautiful on mobile devices, you may need to optimize parts of your page for mobile devices after you've made the changes. I'll explain exactly how this works in the video that is now displayed.